On this episode, we answer a couple of more of your questions, one being how to be a better coach, and the other, how do we fix little girl syndrome? Hey, everybody, and welcome back to our latest episode. You may have noticed a little bit of a difference when logging on for this episode. Yes, we did rebrand the podcast to the Hit Zero podcast, or Hit Zero, a cheerleading podcast. The reasoning for that, honestly, is I wanted to really show the public and show you guys, the focus of our show. And that's really to, following our tagline of wanting to build better cheer athletes. The ultimate goal is hit zero, right? As we want to work towards perfection and being better. There's a lot of emphasis put into creating athletes and routines that do strive for this, this hit zero thing, mentality. And it's truly something that, as I've dove into thinking about what exactly that term means and the importance of it to our athletes and our coaches, it sort of permeates the entire sport, and it should permeate our lives as well. As cheer athletes, as coaches, as parents of cheer athletes, that hit zero mentality should permeate, throughout our lives. It should be something that we strive for, not only in cheerleading, but in other aspects where we are actively working towards being the best that we possibly can be, and trying our hardest to, essentially live without mistake. Now, we recognize that it's okay if we're not perfect, obviously, because no one is, but having that mindset of constant and never-ending improvement, always looking to make ourselves better, looking for areas that we can improve upon, is just a great mindset and a great way to live. So from now moving forward, Hit Zero podcast, and I hope you guys like the change. So speaking of which, we're going to dive into this week's episode. We're going to cover two questions that were submitted through our Instagram page. And they're really great questions. And, one of them is coming from the athlete perspective and one is from the coach's perspective. A lot of the things we cover are, athlete submitted questions where they're asking about certain skills and things like that. So to get a question, from a coach that is not about, it's not an athlete trying to get, skill wise, it's a different mindset, and it's actually a really good topic. And so our first question is, how can I be a better coach? And that question is very deep, right? There's a lot of answers to that question. It's not just a straightforward thing. And so we have to look at all of the things that go into coaching, right? I mean, you're an expert in the field. So, technically you have to be knowledgeable. Experience is a huge part. It's very hard to coach something if you haven't experienced it. And then you have the step-by-step things that you're working towards. You're working on, improving a routine or creating and improving a routine, skill improvement, athlete development. There's so many things that go into being a good coach. I mean, there's books on books on books and courses and classes and everything that you couldn't cover it all in a 10-minute spot. But some things that you can, conceptual and, concrete things that you can focus on. We will answer some of those and present some of those in this episode. So, my opinion, the first thing is you have to be able to connect. And that's connect with your athletes. That's connect with your parents. That's connect with if you're have multiple coaches, being able to connect with your colleagues. But you got to be able to create a connection. You have to be a people person, and you have to learn how to reach people where they are. Some athletes thrive in a stressful environment. They like having they do well under pressure. They respond well to pressure, and you can really see that the harder you push them, the better they become. Now, some athletes do not do well in that situation. Some athletes, they thrive on positive reinforcement. They thrive on that uplifting type coaching. And not that those two styles are separate and distinct, or they have to be stark opposites, but you really just have to, if you have to find the balance between those two. And if you have to lean one way or another to reach an athlete, you have to find that. So the first thing is you have to learn your kids, learn your athletes. You have to learn about what makes them tick, what motivates them, because one coaching style is not going to be effective for everybody. So we have to be able to be flexible with how we reach our athletes. Another thing is you have to be an example to your athletes. You have to lead by example. There's a difference between leading from the front, and pushing from the back. So we can't just tell our athletes what to do and expect that just by us telling and explaining that they are going to get it and they're going to be able to do exactly what we want. You have to lead by example, and that comes, in multiple ways. You have to be a good communicator, right? You have to have a positive mindset around your kids. You can't come in and be, tired or not engaging. You have to, if you are a coach that puts a lot of emphasis in conditioning and fitness and being healthy, and making sure that your athletes are functional athletes, you got to be functional and athletic yourself. Now, I'm not saying that you can't be a good coach if you can't run a marathon. I'm not saying that at all. But it's like, in my field and working in healthcare, if somebody were to come into my office and I was, 40 pounds overweight and, I smoked or, didn't take care of myself, it'd be very hard for a patient to respect me and then respect the advice that I give them to get better. So it's just like that with our kids. If we're going to be a leader for our kids, we have to be an example of what we expect from them. And that, again, that could go, we could talk on that topic for an hour, but ideally when you look at yourself as a coach and you kind of take it, kind of step outside of yourself, are you setting the example that you want for your athletes? Are you on time? Are you excited about practice? Are you putting an emphasis on your own health? Are you holding your athletes accountable to do the same? So I'm a really big fan of coaches that are still engaged and active with their sport. In recent episodes, we've interviewed, Coach Keegan Hubbard out in Arizona. He still stunts and, stunts with his athletes and shows them, actively shows them how to do things. At STARS, the All-Star program that I work with here in San Antonio, the coaches, for the most part, you've got one, Coach Chris Hendon, who Team USA was, still stunts with kids. Now he actually shows a lot. He's very hands-on with teaching, especially for their world's level team, teaching co-ed stunting. A lot of our other coaches that coach some of the summit teams and things of that nature still are actively competing. So I think it says a lot about a program when you have coaches or your staff that are physically doing at least being physically involved. You don't have to. I don't expect a 45-year-old coach to throw punch through to double. If you can, that's awesome. But just being active, being healthy, and being fit says a lot. So again, being a good coach, leading by example, and there's a lot. Again, there's so many things that go into being a great coach. I think that a lot of it has to do also, kind of wrapping this question up. I think a lot of it has to do with being coachable yourself. So every great coach or every great leader learns from other great leaders. And so, being a coach that has the mindset that you know it all, you know what's best for every situation, you're the only expert that matters. I mean, those types of mentality and those types of attitude are very destructive because everyone, whether you're a coach or not, everyone can learn from someone. There's always somebody that may know something that you don't know, and that's okay. And that's what's beautiful about learning, is that there's always somebody that may have something that you didn't know. And there's a big part of that outside of just cheerleading, but that's there's a reason why, doctors and lawyers and healthcare and certain, engineers. I mean, there's a reason why there's continuing education for many of the professions out there. And it's because there's always going to be new information that's coming out. There's always going to be new trains of thought, new ways to do things. And there's always a need, and should always be a want to learn more. So as a coach, your job also is to continue to evolve so that you improve yourself as a coach. You're able to deliver the goods, so to say. So I think that having that mindset of yourself, again, that kind of falls back into the, leading by example, is you as a coach should constantly be trying to improve your craft, because as time progresses, coaching styles evolve. The focus for programs evolve. The way kids respond evolves a lot too. So we can't be stuck in our ways, and say there's only one way to do it, and this is the way I do it, and that's it. So great first question. We're going to take a break for just a second with our second question. We'll be back momentarily. Stick with us. All right, guys, and we're back. Our second question is kind of a funny question, because it's something that it's the first time I've actually had this question asked. So I got a little bit of a chuckle out of it, because it's so common that I started to think about it. I'm like, why haven't we had this question before? And the question is, what can I do? Essentially, what can I do if my flyer suffers from little girl syndrome? For those that are not familiar with what little girl syndrome is when you have a top girl that is little, and because of her size, she's never really been difficult to lift, but that leads to laziness. So as our flyers, when they start off young, being a little bit lazy in the air, it's not as detrimental, because a lot of times the skill levels aren't very high. They've got multiple bases, multiple people underneath them holding them. So we give them some leeway a lot of times when they're first learning to be a little lazy, right? Because we expect that as they do it more, they're going to develop the strength and the muscle and the coordination to be a more effective flyer. However, some girls never lose that. And so what you'll find is some of the smallest girls can also be the laziest. And it's, I don't know if it's a mindset thing that they don't have to try hard because they're small or what, but I've actually experienced this before myself. And I've talked about my partners that I had in college quite a bit in previous episodes and things. And, my my best partner in college, the one that I cheered with my fifth year, pound for pound was the heaviest girl that I had as a partner. And I say that with quotation marks. I say heaviest because she still was small, but she was also the strongest that I ever stunted with. I mean, Ashley was a beast, and she still is. She's had a set of twins. She's had another little boy, and she is still, crazy fit, six pack. She is a fitness freak, and she was through college as well. And even though she weighed more, by a few more pounds than any girl I had ever stunted with, stunting with her was one of the easiest girls I ever stunted with. You see a lot of this little girl syndrome in college camps or college clinics. So it'll happen, a college will put on a clinic where you can come and stunt with the guys. Or, if your program is big enough, a lot of times you'll have guys that come in also that want to stunt with the girls, like, some of your Kentucky camps and some of the bigger schools. And so a lot of times you'll get these younger flyers that have never really been taught how to be a strong, aggressive top. And you'll see a lot of this little girl syndrome at these clinics where you have a tiny girl that you expect would be, rock star, easy to hold up in the air, but she's sloppy and lazy. So it makes it actually way more challenging. I stunted with a girl one time that was in the 80 or so pound range, and this was in college as well. And she was harder to keep in the air than Ashley, my bigger flyer. So little girl syndrome is not something, I don't think that the Flyers purposefully or they're actively trying to be lazy. I think that they just got away with being small for so long that when, you get to a point where you need that control to do higher level skills, that then they don't have it. And so it gets very frustrating. So really, and honestly, it's a pretty straightforward answer with how to overcome having little girl syndrome. And that is, I mean, as boring as it may be or as simple as it may sound, you have to get stronger. And it's one of those examples where your flexibility and all that stuff is not going to be beneficial for you at all, because the reason that those small girls feel heavy is that they don't hold their body weight well. And the only way to do that and to get that control is to become stronger and have more body awareness than you previously did. And, you have to think about it this way. If I handed somebody, a piece of like a 2x4 piece of wood, long straight piece of wood, and said, hold this straight up, it's not going to be that challenging. But if you give somebody a rope and you're like, hold this whole rope up, it's very, very challenging because the rope is flexible. It moves. It's limp, right? You can't hold it straight. And so you have to imagine that you are the board. You have to be stiff as a piece of wood. And, not only for, ease of control in the air, but also for safety. If you're a lazy top girl and you have, this little girl syndrome, and let's say a stunt goes sideways and you're coming down, if you're loosey-goosey as you're flying down, falling down onto your base, they're trying to catch you, but there's nothing controlled about the catch. So we end up possibly hitting our base, or we hit our back spots if you're in a group, so it becomes very unsafe as well. So in order to fix little girl syndrome, we have to get our girls stronger. They need to be lifting weights. They need to be exercising. They need to be doing things that require them to use more muscle to create that stability. There's devices that you can use there's one called a BOSU that is the half fitness ball. And then the bottom half is flat, hard plastic that you can stand on. Standing on one of those for, extended periods of time on one leg, building that ankle stability and that hip stability. You can also work single-legged strengthening drills like lunges, box step-ups, split squats. If you want to get on Google and look up a Bulgarian split squat, you can see what I mean. That's another name for it, is a rear foot elevated split squat. You can do a front foot elevated split squat. You can do, jumping lunges. I mean, there's so many things that you can do to build strength and stability that it's truly endless. So another thing to focus on is working all the areas that we typically focus on for being flexible, like your hamstrings, our groin, our adductor muscles. We have to work on strengthening those as well. So working on, the leg lifts, where you can Google adductor strengthening. Usually there's a sideline version where you're lifting your leg off the floor. If you're at a gym, there's the machines where you're either pushing your knees and legs out or you're squeezing your knees and legs together. I'm not a huge fan of those, but if that's all you got, then it's better than nothing. But really just focusing on building stability around the hips, building stability in the ankle for sure. And really just, again, getting stronger as a flyer. There's this mindset that, our bases and our guys need to be super strong and our top girls need to be, light and flexible. And I completely disagree with that. I think that's absolutely false. If you want to be a good flyer, yes, you need to have requisite flexibility to get into body positions, but that's about it. Anything beyond that, you're basically setting yourself up for laziness in the air because you're weak and hypermobile, or you're setting yourself up for injury because you're completely imbalanced in your mobility. So I think that a lot of our emphasis needs to shift towards strength building for our top girls. And, going back, if you're curious about how effective that can be, go back to our episode a while back where we interviewed coaches Brian and Nicole Nichols from West Georgia. Their all of their girls in their program do CrossFit. They lift weights. They train with a CrossFit style training focused on, more cheerleading type lifts, but the girls lift just as much volume wise as the guys do, and they love it. And their program is extremely successful, like really, really successful. And if you're not sure what really, really successful is, get on the University of West Georgia cheer page, social media, anywhere, and you can see how many national championships they've won at the collegiate level. So strength building. And if you're a guy and you're trying to get your flyer to not have little girl syndrome, then you have to push her to get stronger. And even with stunting, it's you can reinforce the strength stuff in your stunts. If you notice that they're lazy with a certain skill, do that skill over and over and over and over. Throw them up, put them into a lib, and make them hold the lib for as long as they possibly can. Yes, that's going to tax you too, but it's going to build your conditioning, which is great. So it's kind of a double whammy. But if you notice that there's certain skills that your top girl is lazy in, force her to do those skills until she becomes better at them. Trust me, she'll figure out really quickly how to get better at a skill if it's the only one that you guys are struggling with, and it's the one that you guys work on the most. So you guys can be an active role in helping your girls not to be lazy. So thank you guys so much for joining us. Again, if you did not realize at the beginning, now you can check it out. We've changed the name of our podcast to the Hit Zero Podcast. Again, it truly does tap into the mentality that we want to have, not only in cheer, but also in life. Additionally, if you haven't seen already the Patreon page, we've had some folks sign up for our Patreon page and are getting some of our exclusive content. I'm super, super honored to have these folks jump on and have this working relationships, more intimate working relationship. If you're unfamiliar with what we're talking about, check out patreon.com/thecheerdoc, patreon.com/thecheerdoc. Check out some of the exclusive content that we have there. Also, we did a giveaway for the Back Tuck Cookbook. If you missed that, be on the lookout. We'll have another post for that here shortly. It's a chance to get that for nothing, for free, for absolutely nothing. So thank you guys so much for joining us. We'll catch you on the next episode. See ya. Thank you guys so much for joining us this week. Make sure to check out anchor.fm/cheerleading if you want to become a contributor to the podcast and help our scholarship to grow. We'll catch you on the next episode.